Welcome back to our shared space for curiosity and insight, Mindcraft. Hello, fellow explorers of the mind. I'm your guide on this journey to understand the subtle, intricate workings of our inner world. Today, we're going to hold up a mirror to a fascinating psychological phenomenon. A mirror that sometimes reflects an image of ourselves we don't recognize, or perhaps don't want to. It's a topic that is at once humorous and deeply sobering. Have you ever watched someone on a reality TV audition, singing their heart out with the conviction of a superstar, while in reality, every note was a fresh new assault on the laws of music? Or have you met someone who, after just a few weeks of learning to drive, confidently declares they can handle any situation on the road like a professional racer? Or maybe, just maybe, in a quiet moment of honesty, we can recall a time when we ourselves argued passionately about a topic we'd only just skimmed, ready to debate an expert who has dedicated their life to it. If any of this feels familiar, then welcome to the world of the Dunning-Kruger Effect. The name might sound academic, but don't worry. Here at Mindcraft, we're going to decode it in the plainest language possible. Our topic today, the Dunning-Kruger Effect, why we're often so wrong about being so right. And more importantly, how can we spot it and turn the admission of ignorance into the first step toward true wisdom? So let's pour a cup of tea, find a quiet space, and begin this expedition into the mind. Part 1. The Tale of the Lemon Juice Bandit. To begin, I want to tell you a true story, a story that laid the foundation for this entire theory. It happened in 1995 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A man named MacArthur Wheeler robbed 2 banks in broad daylight. The peculiar thing was, he didn't wear a mask. No ski mask, no bandana, nothing at all. When the police arrested him later that day, thanks to crystal clear images from the security cameras, Wheeler was in utter disbelief. He muttered, "But I wore the juice." You heard that right. The juice. Lemon juice. Wheeler naively believed that because lemon juice can be used as invisible ink, rubbing it on his face would make him invisible to security cameras. He had even tested his theory by taking a Polaroid of himself after applying the juice. And though the resulting photo was a bit blurry, he was completely convinced his hypothesis was sound. This story is as tragic as it is comical, and it's deeply thought-provoking. It led 2 social psychologists at Cornell University, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, to ask a profound question. How could someone be so blindingly confident in an idea that was so fundamentally, absurdly wrong? Wheeler's incompetence wasn't just in his inability to rob a bank discreetly, it was in his inability to recognize his own incompetence. From this, the 2 researchers launched a series of groundbreaking studies. They tested college students in various domains: grammar, logic, and even humor. The results consistently revealed a pattern. The individuals who performed the worst on the tests were the most likely to dramatically overestimate their own ability. They weren't just unskilled. They were unaware of being unskilled. Conversely, the top performers tended to slightly underestimate their ability. They knew they were good, but they were also keenly aware of what they didn't know. This is the essence of the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It's a vicious cycle of ignorance. You are too unskilled to be able to recognize just how unskilled you are. Does that sound complicated? Picture it this way. To be a great chess player, you need to know about openings, strategy, and endgames. But that very knowledge is also the tool you use to evaluate whether a move is good or bad. If you know nothing about chess strategy, you won't just make foolish moves. You'll be incapable of seeing how foolish they are. You'll look at the board and think, "I'm doing great," while your opponent, a true master, can see 10 moves ahead to your inevitable checkmate. This reveals the double curse at the heart of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The first curse is that you lack a certain skill. The second, more insidious curse is that this very lack of skill prevents you from seeing your own deficiency. The same knowledge required to be good at something is the knowledge required to recognize what good even looks like. It's our internal supervisor helping us gauge whether we truly understand something. For the novice, that supervisor is often fast asleep, leaving them unable to self-correct. Part 2, Inside the Overconfident Brain. Why do we fall for it? Wheeler's story is incredible, but it's not an isolated case. It reveals a deep mechanism within all our brains. So, why are we all so susceptible to this trap of overconfidence? There are a few profound psychological reasons. First, our brains are inherently lazy and love simplicity. The human brain consumes an enormous amount of energy. So as an evolutionary instinct, it's always looking for shortcuts to conserve that energy whenever possible. Confronting the reality of "I don't know" is a complex process. It requires us to admit a flaw, seek new information, analyze, synthesize, and possibly change an entire belief system. This is hard, energy-intensive work. It operates on a principle called cognitive ease. When information is simple, familiar, and easy to process, our brain tends to believe it's true. Overconfidence is the ultimate state of cognitive ease. Conversely, arriving at the conclusion, "I know this," is incredibly fast and easy. It provides a feeling of comfort, a false sense of certainty. The brain loves this feeling. It's like choosing to walk on a smooth, paved road instead of hacking your way through a dense jungle to forge a new path. Blind confidence is the shortcut the brain takes to avoid the messy complexity of reality. Second, it's the ego's defense mechanism. For many of us, admitting "I don't know" or "I was wrong" isn't just an intellectual issue. It's a blow to our self-esteem. Our ego wants to feel smart, competent, and right. When faced with evidence of our own shortcomings, a natural defensive reaction is to deny it. This is closely related to cognitive dissonance. When our actions conflict with our core beliefs about ourselves, an uncomfortable tension arises. To relieve this tension, instead of changing our self-belief, the brain often takes the easier path, distorting reality, denying the evidence, or downplaying the task's importance. "It's not that I'm bad at this, the test was just unfair" is a classic self-talk to soothe this dissonance. We will find any reason to justify ourselves. "The test was biased. That person who criticized me just has it in for me. This topic isn't really that important anyway." All of this is just to protect the flattering image we've constructed of ourselves. Overconfidence, in this case, acts as a shield, protecting a fragile ego from hard truths. Third, we often suffer from the illusion of explanatory depth. This is another fascinating psychological quirk. We tend to think we understand how things in the world work far better than we actually do. For example, do you feel confident that you understand how a zipper works? Most of us would say yes. But if asked to draw a detailed diagram of its mechanism, explaining precisely how the teeth interlock when you pull up and separate when you pull down, we would quickly realize the gaps in our knowledge. Let's try another common object, a bicycle. Most of us know how to ride one, but can you explain exactly why a bicycle stays balanced while in motion? What role does the gyroscopic effect of the wheels play? Why does leaning allow you to turn? As we start to answer these questions, we quickly see the difference between knowing how to use and knowing how it works. We mistake familiarity with deep understanding. Similarly, in many fields, we skim a few articles, listen to a few conversations, and we feel familiar with the topic. The brain misinterprets this familiarity as mastery, creating an illusion of knowledge and inflating our confidence. Understanding these underlying mechanisms allows us to have more compassion for ourselves and others. We realize that Dunning-Kruger isn't a sign of willful ignorance, but a natural byproduct of how the human brain is wired. Part 3. The journey on the graph of knowledge, from Mount Stupid to the plateau of sustainability. To better understand this journey of awareness, scientists often describe the Dunning-Kruger effect with a very intuitive graph. Let's trace that graph in our minds. The horizontal axis is your actual knowledge or skill level, from novice to expert. The vertical axis is your level of confidence. Now let's follow someone's journey as they learn something new, like playing the guitar. Stage 1. The peak of Mount Stupid. When you first pick up a guitar, you learn a few basic chords, G, C, D. You can clumsily strum along to Happy Birthday. In that moment, an amazing feeling washes over you. You think, wow, this isn't so hard. I've got a knack for this. You start imagining yourself on stage, shredding a complex solo. This is the peak of Mount Stupid. At this stage, your confidence skyrockets to its highest point on the graph, while your actual knowledge is at its lowest. Why? Because you only know what you know, and you are completely unaware of the vast, complex world of guitar playing that exists beyond your grasp. Bare chords, scales, fingerstyle techniques, licks, solos. The world of unknown unknowns is entirely invisible to you. You're like a person standing on a small hill, but because a thick fog obscures the surroundings, you think you're on top of the highest mountain in the world. This is the most dangerous stage, where we make foolish pronouncements, risky decisions, and refuse to listen to advice. The novice investor who, after a few lucky trades, starts giving financial advice to everyone. The person who reads one self-help book and feels they understand all the secrets of the universe. The danger is that this confidence can lead to disastrous real-world decisions, causing financial loss, broken relationships, and even safety risks. Stage 2, the Valley of Despair. After some time basking in the glory of your own perceived genius, you start to get more exposure. You listen to a truly great guitarist play. You try to learn a more complex song. And then, reality hits you like a ton of bricks. You realize you can't switch chords smoothly. Your fingers ache. The techniques that others make look effortless feel impossible. Suddenly, the vast world you never knew existed reveals itself. You realize that what you know is a single grain of sand on an endless beach. Your confidence plummets. From the peak of the mountain, you fall straight into a deep canyon. This is the Valley of Despair. Here, you feel discouraged and helpless. But let's be clear, this isn't just an intellectual reassessment. It's a deeply emotional experience. The shock of this fall can be immense, triggering feelings of shame, embarrassment, and fraudulence. It's not just disappointment, it's a feeling of being betrayed by your own perception. How could I have been so naive? That question can echo in your mind, and the voice of your inner critic, once a faint whisper, now becomes a deafening roar, replaying a litany of failures. You're just not smart enough. You'll never be good at this. You were a fool for even trying. This is the crucible of learning. It's where genuine growth is forged, but it requires immense emotional resilience. It demands the courage to be vulnerable, to embrace the discomfort of being a beginner again. It's the bravery to look foolish, to ask the stupid questions, to admit you need help, and to persist even when every fiber of your being wants to retreat back to the safety of the familiar. Many people, when faced with this emotional pain, simply quit. They hang the guitar on the wall, close the book, or leave the class. The difference between those who eventually achieve mastery and those who remain dabblers often isn't raw talent. It's the emotional fortitude to endure this valley without letting it crush their spirit. The crucial shift that happens here is learning to decouple your self-worth from your current performance. Your inability to play a complex solo today doesn't define you as a person. It simply defines you as a person who is learning. This realization is liberating. It transforms the valley from a place of shame into a place of opportunity, a necessary, humbling, and ultimately empowering fire that burns away the fragile, inflated ego, leaving behind a stronger, more authentic foundation upon which true competence can be built. This harsh valley is not a sign of failure. It is the true, unfiltered beginning of wisdom. Stage 3, the slope of enlightenment. If you are persistent enough to push through the frustration in the valley, you begin a new journey. A slow, humble, and steady journey. You begin to climb the slope of enlightenment. On this slope, your confidence grows gradually, but this time it's built on a solid foundation, real knowledge and skill. Every new chord you master, every new technique you perfect, reinforces your confidence in a healthy way. You no longer compare yourself negatively to the masters. You see them as inspiration, as a goal to strive for. You understand that this is a long process that requires dedication and practice. Your confidence now is not blind, it's earned. Stage 4, the plateau of sustainability. Finally, after years of hard work, you become an expert, a seasoned guitarist. You've reached the top of the slope, but the place you arrive isn't a sharp, jagged peak like Mount Stupid. It's a vast, stable plateau of sustainability. Here, your confidence is very high, but it almost never reaches the 100% certainty of the beginner. Why? Because true expertise has taught you about the immense complexity of knowledge. A real expert is the one who best understands the limits of their own field. They know there are always new things to learn, different perspectives to consider, and new techniques to discover. But there's another, more subtle reason for their humility. While the novice suffers from the curse of not knowing, the expert often contends with a different, opposite challenge: the curse of knowledge. This is the other side of the Dunning-Kruger coin. It's a cognitive bias where once you know something, it becomes incredibly difficult to imagine what it was like not to know it. Your knowledge has cursed you with an inability to see the world from a beginner's perspective. Have you ever met a brilliant professor who was a terrible teacher? They might use complex jargon and leap over foundational concepts, assuming everyone in the room shares their baseline understanding. They aren't being arrogant. They are cursed by their own expertise. They genuinely cannot remember what it felt like to not understand these obvious ideas. Think of a software engineer who can't figure out why users find their app confusing. To them, the interface is perfectly intuitive. Or a parent trying to teach a child to tie their shoes, forgetting the dozen tiny, non-obvious motor skills that have become second nature to them. This curse creates a profound communication gap. It explains why so many brilliant minds struggle to share their wisdom effectively. They are so far down the road of knowledge that they've forgotten what the beginning of the path looks like. But the curse of knowledge isn't the only psychological force at play on this high plateau of expertise. There's another, equally fascinating reason why the highly competent tend to underestimate their own abilities, a phenomenon known as the false consensus effect. In essence, this is the tendency for experts to incorrectly assume that what is easy for them must also be easy for others. Because a complex task feels effortless and intuitive in their own minds, they project that same sense of ease onto the general population. Think of a world-class musician who, after playing a breathtakingly complex piece, says with all sincerity, "Oh, it's not that difficult, you just have to feel the music." They aren't being falsely modest. In their reality, it isn't that difficult. They have so deeply internalized the thousands of hours of practice that they can no longer access the memory of struggle. Or consider a brilliant mathematician who becomes frustrated when students don't immediately grasp a fundamental theorem. In their mind, the logic is as simple and self-evident as 1 + 1 = 2, and they genuinely struggle to comprehend why others can't see the same elegant simplicity. This creates a beautiful symmetrical paradox with the Dunning-Kruger Effect. The person on Mount Stupid overestimates their ability because they cannot see their own deficits. In contrast, the expert on the plateau of sustainability underestimates their ability because they cannot see how exceptional their skills truly are. They look at their own performance and think, well, if I can do this so easily, it must not be that special. Surely, most people can do this too. They falsely assume a consensus of competence that simply doesn't exist. So the expert's humility is born from 3 sources. It's the outward-looking awareness of the vastness of knowledge, the inward-looking challenge of the curse of knowledge, and a flawed outward projection of their own ease through the false consensus effect. This paints a much richer picture of the expert's mind, a mind that is not only wise, but also, in its own way, just as prone to misjudgment as the novices, albeit in the opposite direction. And this brings us to a fascinating realization. This very modern psychological map, with its peaks and valleys, leads us to the doorstep of an ancient thinker who seemed to understand this journey perfectly, nearly 2,500 years ago. Part 5 echoes from ancient Greece, the wisdom of Socrates. Nearly 2,500 years ago, in ancient Athens, there lived a philosopher named Socrates. He wrote no books and opened no schools. His method was to wander the streets, engaging in conversation and asking questions of anyone he met, from politicians and poets to craftsmen. Socrates is famous for a seemingly contradictory statement. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. When we first hear this, it sounds strange. How could a great sage, a man whom the oracle at Delphi declared the wisest in Athens, claim to know nothing? But if we place Socrates' statement alongside the Dunning-Kruger graph we just drew, everything becomes clear. Think back to the people on the peak of Mount Stupid. They are the ones who think they know a great deal, when in fact they know very little. They were the politicians and poets with whom Socrates conversed. When Socrates asked them probing questions about the nature of justice, beauty, or courage, he exposed the fact that their knowledge was merely surface level, a collection of unexamined prejudices. They couldn't coherently define the very concepts they used every day. They were the ones who did not know that they did not know. Socrates' method, now known as the Socratic method, is a tool designed to shatter the Dunning-Kruger illusion. By relentlessly asking, why? What does that mean? How do you know that's true? He doesn't provide answers. Instead, he forces his conversation partner to examine the foundations of their own beliefs. This process often leads to a point called aporia, a state of confusion and impasse upon realizing you don't truly know what you thought you knew. This is the doorway from the peak of Mount Stupid down into the valley of despair, a necessary step to begin the search for truth. Socrates, in contrast, is the embodiment of someone who has traversed the valley of despair and is now standing on the plateau of sustainability. He wasn't claiming to be literally empty-headed. Of course not. He had knowledge and a sharp method of reasoning. But his knowing was in his profound awareness of the vastness of his own ignorance. He understood that human knowledge is an ocean, and what he possessed was but a few drops. The phrase, "I know that I know nothing," is not a declaration of ignorance. It is a declaration of intellectual humility. It's the recognition that all knowledge has limits, that there is always a possibility of being wrong, and that the process of learning is never ending. It is the perfect antidote to the smug certainty of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Socrates taught us that the first step to wisdom isn't to cram our heads with facts, but to admit our own ignorance. Falling into the valley of despair is not something to be ashamed of. It's a necessary experience, an initiation rite on the path to knowledge. Only when you realize you don't know do you truly begin to want to learn. Only when you recognize your cup is empty are you ready to receive new wisdom. Part 6, the ripple effect, real-world consequences. The Dunning-Kruger effect is more than just a psychological curiosity or a source of amusing anecdotes. Its consequences ripple through every facet of our lives, often with serious and damaging results. It's a silent saboteur in our workplaces, our societies, and our personal lives. In the workplace, the effect can be toxic. Picture a manager who, despite having no real leadership skills, is utterly convinced of their own visionary genius. They dismiss feedback, implement poorly thought-out strategies, and can't understand why their team is demoralized and unproductive. Their overconfidence prevents them from seeing the chaos they create. On the other end, an employee who overestimates their abilities might take on a critical project they are not equipped to handle. They promise results they can't deliver, leading to missed deadlines, wasted resources, and ultimately, project failure, all while they genuinely believe they are performing well. In the public sphere, the stakes are even higher. When it comes to complex issues like public health, economic policy, or climate change, the Dunning-Kruger effect becomes a powerful engine for misinformation. Individuals with a surface-level understanding gained from a few articles or social media posts can become staunch advocates for dangerous ideas. They confidently reject the consensus of experts who have dedicated their lives to these fields, creating a false equivalency between their fledgling opinion and decades of rigorous research. This isn't just a debate. It leads to real-world harm, from vaccine hesitancy fueled by armchair epidemiologists to misguided economic policies championed by those who fail to grasp the intricate complexities of a global economy. And in our personal lives, the effect can be financially and emotionally devastating. Consider the realm of personal finance. A person might watch a few YouTube videos about cryptocurrency, feel they've cracked the code, and then invest their life savings into a volatile, poorly understood asset. Their initial confidence, born from a tiny sliver of knowledge, blinds them to the immense risks they are taking. When the market turns, they are left not only with financial ruin, but also with the bewildering question of how they could have been so wrong. From a failing project at work to a public health crisis, the consequences are very real. This bias isn't just about being wrong. It's about the damage that can be done when being wrong is paired with the unshakable conviction of being right. Understanding these stakes makes the quest for intellectual humility not just a philosophical exercise, but an urgent necessity. Part 7, the web of biases, Dunning-Kruger's unseen allies. To truly grasp the stubborn power of the Dunning-Kruger effect, we must understand that it rarely acts alone. It's not an isolated glitch in our thinking. Rather, it's the most visible part of a complex, interconnected web of cognitive biases. It's the alpha of a pack of mental shortcuts that work together to protect our ego and preserve our sense of certainty. To see the full picture, we must shine a light on its unseen allies. First, meet its most loyal companion, confirmation bias, the echo chamber builder. Once we're perched atop Mount Stupid, feeling confident in our newfound knowledge, we don't just sit there passively. We become active architects of our own reality. If we believe we're a brilliant investor after one lucky stock pick, we will subconsciously seek out information that validates this belief. We'll devour articles about overnight millionaires, follow social media gurus who mirror our reckless optimism, and dismiss cautionary tales from seasoned investors as fear-mongering or outdated thinking. Each piece of confirming evidence is another brick in the wall of our overconfidence. Disconfirming evidence, on the other hand, is either ignored, discredited, or rationalized away. Confirmation bias doesn't just maintain our ignorance, it actively feeds and fortifies it, ensuring that our little hill of confidence feels more and more like an unassailable mountain. Next in line is the availability heuristic, the spotlight on success. Our brains are not impartial statisticians. They are storytellers that favor vivid, easily recalled information. We don't judge our abilities based on a comprehensive review of all our past performances. Instead, we base our judgment on what comes to mind most easily. That one time you successfully assembled a piece of IKEA furniture without the instructions shines like a Hollywood spotlight in your memory. The dozens of other times you struggled with a loose screw or a confusing diagram are lost in the shadows of your mental backstage. The Dunning-Kruger Effect latches onto this single, brightly lit success. It takes that one emotionally charged, easily available memory and wrongly extrapolates it into a general rule about your overall competence, all while ignoring the vast, less memorable dataset of your struggles and failures. Then there's the bandwagon effect, the siren song of social proof. As deeply social creatures, we are wired to seek consensus and belonging. When someone on Mount Stupid voices their overconfident opinion online and is met with a chorus of likes, shares, and agreeable comments, it's a powerful psychological reward. The brain doesn't interpret this as, many people in my bubble happen to share this opinion. It interprets it as, this opinion must be correct because so many people agree. This social validation makes it exponentially harder to retreat from an initial overconfident stance. To do so would mean not only admitting personal error, but also risking social alienation from the tribe that validated you. The bandwagon effect adds a thick layer of social pressure on top of our internal ego defense, effectively locking us into our initial flawed assessment. Finally, we have the ultimate guardian of the entire web, the bias blind spot. This is perhaps the most insidious ally of all, because it's the bias that tells us that biases are for other people. As you've been listening to this, you might have been nodding along, thinking of specific people in your life, a relative, a coworker, an online commenter, who perfectly embody these traits. That very act of pointing outward is the bias blind spot in action. We are fantastic at diagnosing these cognitive flaws in others, but we possess a powerful built-in mechanism that convinces us we are the rare, objective exception to the rule. It's the final firewall that protects our ego from the uncomfortable truth of our own fallibility. Even when we are handed a detailed map of our own mind's errors, the blind spot convinces us that we're not actually on that map. This is precisely why simple awareness of these biases is not enough. It's why the active, humbling exercises we'll discuss next are not just helpful, they are absolutely essential for navigating our own minds. Part 8. The Antidote, Forging Intellectual Humility. So, if we're all susceptible to this complex web of biases, are we doomed to be overconfident forever? Absolutely not. Recognizing the problem is the first step, but the true craft of the mind lies in building a toolkit of practices to counteract these natural tendencies. We've explored a number of practical exercises, seeking targeted feedback, cultivating a beginner's mind, practicing pre-mortems, and thinking in probabilities. These are the how-tos of intellectual humility. But beneath all these techniques lies a deeper, more fundamental shift. It's a change not just in what we do, but in how we feel about the very nature of being wrong. This is the final and most profound act of Mindcraft, learning to find joy in discovering our own mistakes. From a young age, we are taught that being wrong is a form of failure. It's a red X on a test, a scolding from a teacher, a moment of public embarrassment. We learn to associate the feeling of being wrong with shame, with inadequacy, with defeat. This conditioning runs deep. It's why our ego reacts so defensively, as we discussed. The sting of being wrong feels like a direct threat to our self-worth. The valley of despair is so painful precisely because of this deeply ingrained belief that error equals failure. But what if this is a profound misunderstanding? What if we could reframe what it means to be wrong? Imagine your entire collection of beliefs about the world, from how to cook an egg to the nature of the universe, is not you, but rather a map that you carry. This map is your personal guide to navigating reality. None of us is born with a perfect map. Our initial maps are crude sketches, drawn by our parents, our culture, and our limited early experiences. The entire purpose of learning and living is not to defend this initial flawed map at all costs, but to become a master cartographer of your own mind. To constantly, relentlessly, and joyfully update your map to better reflect the territory of reality. Now, with this metaphor in mind, what happens when you discover you were wrong about something? It means you've just found a significant error on your map. A river is marked where there is only desert. A mountain is missing. A road leads to a dead end. Is this a moment of failure? From the cartographer's perspective, it is the exact opposite. It is a moment of exhilarating discovery. It is a moment of cartographic triumph. You haven't failed. You have successfully located a flaw, and because you found it, you now have the incredible opportunity to correct it, to erase the false river, to pencil in the missing mountain, to redraw the road. In that moment of realizing you were wrong, your map of the world just became more accurate. You have become a better navigator. You are, in a very real sense, wiser and more capable than you were a moment before. This is where the joy lies. It is the joy of liberation, the feeling of being freed from the constraints of a false belief that was holding you back. It is the joy of growth, the tangible sense that you have just leveled up as a thinking human being. And most importantly, it is the joy of renewed curiosity. The discovery of one error on the map doesn't lead to despair. It leads to an exciting new question. If I was wrong about this, what else might I be wrong about? This question is not a source of anxiety, but the engine of lifelong learning. The person stuck on Mount Stupid has fused their identity with their map. For them, any challenge to the map is a personal attack, a threat to their very being. They will defend a flawed map to the bitter end because the alternative, admitting the map is wrong, feels like admitting they themselves are fundamentally flawed. But the person who practices this reframe sees their beliefs as tools, not identities. And tools are meant to be improved, sharpened, and even replaced when a better one comes along. There is no shame in upgrading from a stone axe to a steel one. There is only progress. This final shift is the foundation that makes all the other exercises truly powerful. When you are no longer afraid of being wrong, seeking feedback becomes an exciting treasure hunt for errors on your map. Embracing a beginner's mind is no longer a humbling chore, but a joyful exploration of new territories. This is the ultimate act of mindcraft, to transform the painful sting of error into the profound delight of discovery, and to become a person who truly enjoys the process of becoming a little less wrong every single day. Conclusion. My friends, we have traveled a long way together today, from the story of a foolish bank robber, to the inner workings of our brains, to the graph of awareness, to the ancient wisdom of Socrates, and finally to the challenges of our digital age. The Dunning-Kruger Effect reminds us of a humble truth. The path to knowledge always begins with the admission of ignorance. Wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing the limits of what you know. It's not a destination, but a continuous process of practice, of questioning, and of keeping your mind open. Knowing that you know nothing is not a confession of weakness. It is the declaration of a powerful intellect, one brave enough to face reality and ready for the endless journey of learning. It is the very art of crafting a mind that can remain at peace in a world of noise and confusion. Here at Mindcraft, I would love to hear your story. Have you ever caught yourself on the peak of Mount Stupid? What helped you descend into the valley of despair and begin the true path of learning? Which of these tools have you tried? Please share your experiences and reflections in the comments below. Every story shared is a valuable lesson for our entire community. If you found value in our time together today, please consider sharing it with those you care about. And of course, subscribing and hitting the notification bell is a wonderful way to support Minecraft and join us as we continue to explore and heal our minds together. Thank you for listening. May your day be filled with peace in your heart and clarity in your mind. Until next time.